Good morning, MOMnation, and welcome back to another episode of Live and Learn, where we talk with fantastic, amazing women that have something to share with us. Some knowledge, some piece of knowledge that we can use right away in our lives, or maybe a specialized skill or something like that that we can use in our lives going forward right away as soon as we watch the show. And today we have Angie with us. Welcome, Angie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. Thank you for being with us. I can't wait to dive into this topic. As I was talking with Angie before we got on the show, I was mentioning to her, hey, MOMnation has been around for about 10 years. And this topic that we are about to dive into is something that I see a lot of us, myself included, struggling with. And that is, in your words, Angie, using armor, as in perfectionism, as in numbing, things like that to sort of hide behind. Now, before we dive into that topic, which again, super excited to dive into for my own reasons, can you tell us just a little bit about your background, who you are, what you do, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. I'm Angie Hatch. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Arizona. I've been working as a therapist for about 13 years. I have a private practice and also work at Family Strategies as their clinical director. We have a ton of different, probably 18, 19 therapists here and interns that work here and provide all different types of specialties. What I work with mostly is I'm a certified sex addiction therapist. And so I work a lot with betrayal trauma and sex addiction, pornography addiction. But I also really love that I am a certified Daring Way facilitator. And that means I'm certified in the work of Brene Brown, which a lot of people are familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
She's very relatable and gives such good information and has done a ton of research on like how to live like wholeheartedly. And I facilitate her groups and use her materials in my individual work. And it's probably my favorite thing I do is my groups. So,
Oh, awesome.
yeah,
I love that. And thank you for being out there each and every day, helping people live healthier, happier lives. Really love that work that you do. So thank you. So let's dive right into it. I have seen more often than not moms that are sort of comparing themselves against that Pinterest mom or that perfect Facebook mom, or oh, this mom always looks perfect when she's out with her 15 kids. Like, how does she do that? I am not good enough. I can't live up to that. Can we talk a little bit about perfectionism, striving for perfectionism, and maybe what we see isn't quite the whole story? And we kind of have to keep that in mind, right?
yeah, and I love the analogy that Brene uses in her books. If you're familiar with her books, but she talks a lot about using the arena as like a place we want to show up in, and then like what area of the arena are we paying attention to? And a lot of times we're focusing most on the seats in the arena that are like comparison
Mm,
and scarcity and like who is sitting in those sections for us in our lives, like who matters the most. And usually if you wrote that down and took a minute to reflect on that, you're going to say, my family, my spouse, my parents, those kinds of things, maybe my really good friends, maybe my church leaders, those kind of things. But oftentimes we're paying attention more to the people that don't matter, um, and kind of we call them in the cheap seats.
hmm.
And they're making a lot of noise and they're throwing stuff at us, but they're not even in the arena with us, or they're not even in their own arena in their lives. And so we're giving them a lot more influence on our lives and how we feel. But it definitely affects our mental health because we're comparing our like almost our worst selves because we know all of our weaknesses to
Right.
these presented images online that we have no idea what's going on behind everything. And so what we see is it's not like a true comparison, and comparison really steals that joy from us because again, it's not that accurate comparison even at all. And it really can hurt us in that way. So a lot of times what we're doing with that, we use a lot of armor in our lives to try to keep us um, feeling like we want people to like us, we want people to relate to us. And what that actually does, if you think about it, armor is something we're putting on, and it's
Hmm.
keeping people from really seeing who we are. Like they don't get
Hmm.
to see past that.
Right.
So then it actually like kind of fuels that faulty belief that if you really knew me, you wouldn't really like me or love me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's like kind of giving evidence to that. Like I'm presenting this perfect image, and yet, if I really showed you who I am or all my flaws or even a little bit, then I'm afraid you're gonna not really love me or like me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So we use this armor to protect ourselves, but what it does is it's a barrier to actually being and feeling seen.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that's so important because we all need connection to live and like to feel good. It's actually like a need that we have. So a lot of times we're doing ourselves like this disservice, right? And like sabotaging ourselves because we're thinking this armor is helping us, and oftentimes we'll even say like, I love seeing vulnerability in someone else, but I don't like to show it in myself,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah. I see that a
it's
lot.
yeah, like it's like I'm attracted to that in you. I want to see that in you, and I think that's brave, but I'm not going to show that piece yet.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we'll even wait till the bad thing's over and we've healed from it before we're really comfortable sharing about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's lonely, right? Like if I'm in
Very.
like I'm having like a really hard time and I'm waiting till it's all fixed and finished, like that whole time that I'm going through this really difficult thing, I'm missing out on these opportunities to really connect with people who would probably really want to and really would feel honored to like share in that pain I'm feeling or whatever I'm needing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so do you want to talk about like maybe some of the armor that we use?
Yeah, I would love to. And I
Okay.
really want to pull out a little piece of what you said right there because I think
Yeah.
that it's really important where, bottom line, I feel like as humans, as women, like that's what we want. We want to connect with another. We want to feel seen. We want to be heard. And I appreciate you sort of clarifying that when we are having that armor on, when we are not being our genuine selves, we are preventing what we ultimately want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a big light bulb moment for me.
Hmm.
I'm sure it's a big light bulb moment for our audience as well. So yeah, let's totally jump into what, these different pieces of armor might look like.
Hmm. I know, and I get so passionate about this. I get excited. I
I
give
can see it.
myself like goosebumps. It's so cool. Um, so one of the main ways that people use armor that a lot of us are familiar with is perfectionism,
Yeah.
and even sometimes we use it like as a badge of honor, like, oh well, I'm just a perfectionist, And a lot of moms and like women, we are like, yeah, it's just kind of a thing that I do, but it's actually hurting us. And let's talk about why. So perfectionism is actually externally motivated. So it's looking at the outside externally for motivation. We care what everyone else thinks, and we are operating because we want everyone else to perceive us a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's so dangerous because if I'm giving everyone else out there, even all the people in the cheap seats, that power over me, like I can't even control that. I can't get in someone else's head
Right.
and monitor that. I can't help if somebody likes me or not. So that can make me pretty miserable and pretty, a lot of negative emotions can come up with that. So the opposite of what we really want to look for is that healthy for sorry, striving for excellence is the other way to kind of call that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be that more internally motivated. So I'm like paying attention to like what matters to me, what are my values, who are the people that really matter to me, and how can I show up in a way that I want to be better, right? There's nothing wrong with trying to improve, or like we all want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But where is it coming from? Is it internally motivated or externally? And that it's a really a big difference between those two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like when we are presenting as our genuine selves, as our authentic self, then we have a better opportunity to attract those relationships in our life that match that
Hmm.
versus attracting relationships into our life that are matching the person that we are pretending to be or the
Hmm.
persona that we are, taking on in order to impress or whatever it is. And then those aren't really the best relationships, right? So again, we are keeping ourselves from that genuine connection that we all want.
Yeah, and really, they talk about how perfectionism, like shame, is the birthplace of perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really that piece of like it's being driven by that shame. of I've got to present in this perfect way, or you're not going to like me, or
Yeah.
you're not going to love me, you're going to judge me, or you're going to like think bad of me. So then it just that prevention of again of like letting you really connect to me and know me,
Mm-hmm.
and and what we know is empathy heals us. And so how can I have real empathy if and we're all guilty of this, like if I have this big secret or this thing I'm hiding, but I'm letting you see all the perfect parts of me and the strong parts, then there's still that doubt in the back of my head, like, oh, but yeah, but if you knew I was having marriage problems, or if you
Right.
knew that one of my kids is really struggling, or if you knew that I'm struggling, then yeah, then I'd be afraid that you would like not be there for me.
Right. And I feel like it's okay if somebody doesn't like you,
Yeah,
right?
for
Like
sure.
we're not fun. I'm not for everybody,
Mhm.
and it took
Mhm.
me a while to be comfortable with that and just be
Mhm.
comfortable with the fact that, hey, not everybody is gonna think I'm great. Not everybody is gonna want to be my friend. Not everybody is gonna like me. And
Mhm.
I think that that's for me, it was a bit of a process. I think for some of us, it's a bit of a process to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is, yeah, I think it's just life experience. And as we get older, like hopefully that's where we get to and we realize, we want those true connections where we can really just be ourselves and people who accept us. And yeah, we're not for everybody.
Right.
Um, and that's okay. Absolutely. Another piece of armor that we use that is really, I think, fascinating to talk about is called foreboding joy. And what that means is that we get so vulnerable that we lose our tolerance for that vulnerability. Um, and that joy becomes foreboding. So, for example, there's a really great example about if we're a parent and we get our kids to bed, we have our little child sleeping and they're innocent and all the bad stuff that's happened that day, maybe all the mischief that they've caused. We're looking down on this sweet little innocent, child that's ours. And you just have that like overwhelming feeling of like, oh, I just love this child so much. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we all can relate to that feeling in different ways. But in that moment, I'm feeling that joy and that love. And in that next second, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, something bad's going to happen.
Yes.
Oh, like he's
Oh,
going to,
this plagues me.
yes, that is what foreboding joy is. So in that moment, it's so amazing, so wonderful. But I go to that scary place and we call it dress rehearsing tragedy,
Mm-hmm.
right? We catastrophize. So we think of all the worst things because we think we're protecting ourselves. If I think about the worst thing happening, then maybe I can prevent it from happening. Or if it really did happen, heaven forbid, it's like then at least I'd be prepared for it. Maybe it won't
Mm-hmm.
hurt as bad. But we squander that joy in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Because we're, forward thinking about all the bad things that could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is the right word to use, but I guess I'm kind of glad I'm not alone in that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because I do struggle with that. And that's been a
Mhm.
conversation personally with my therapist is yeah, yeah, we're definitely working on that because it's
Mhm.
big. And I think a lot of moms have that anxiety. In fact, I just had a family member in town. She just left this morning and she's a mom of a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. And she feels the same way. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, I know that this is common. How do we help our moms with this?
Yes. Yes. And I always say, like, the things that we care the most about, we tend to have the most like worry and shame around, actually, because I always say this example, like, if someone were to tell me, hey, Angie, you're not good at like changing a tire. Like I've never changed a tire in my life. And I'm like, I actually, I don't care because that's not something that I like for me is important. Now, if
Right.
you were to tell me, hey, Angie, you're a terrible wife, you're a terrible mother, you're a terrible therapist, like those things would really hurt me, like
Mm-hmm.
really hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we tend to feel, the most pain and shame around areas that matter to us. So it's actually a positive thing in some ways. You can think of like, okay, the reason you're so worried and so worried about being a bad parent is because you care so much. And that's
Yeah.
good, right?
Yeah.
That's actually a sign you're a good parent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've actually heard that before a few
Yeah.
times that that's a
Yeah.
sign that you aren't a bad parent. So, look a little bit deeper into that. What about numbing?
Yeah. Well, before we go to that, I want to give people, everyone the answer. Like, what do we do with foreboding joy? Now that I know what it is, then I'm
Oh,
doing it.
yes. Thank you. We want that.
How do, yeah, like, how do I get out of that? And so the antidote to that is gratitude. So in that moment where I'm standing over my child and I'm feeling that joy and that sense of love and like just extreme feeling of good feelings, and then I start to go to that, like, that picturing that negative thing happening. If I can practice gratitude in that moment, it brings me into the present and helps me stay there. And then so I'm saying something out loud. I'm grateful that I have this little child that
Yeah.
I love so much. And I'm grateful that I could be, have this relationship, even that I could even feel this much. That helps us stay in that moment and helps us stay in that joy. And I mean, that's just kind of having just be really self-aware to recognize when that's happening so we can stay in that and use that gratitude to stay there.
I love it. I love that sort of grounding opportunity. Really great
Mm-hmm.
advice there. All
Yeah.
right, time for numbing.
Yeah. Numbing. So, I mean, Brene Brown talks about how we're like the most addicted, like society
Yeah.
and we have so many ways that we medicate, and there's many examples. We can use food and sugar, and we use social media and work and um, TV, all the things, shopping. What else? Just so much
Substance abuse.
substance abuse, of course, and I work a lot with like pornography and sex addiction, a lot of that. So absolutely different addictions that go in there. So what is the difference between numbing and um, like self-care is the example?
Yeah,
Because
good
it's
question.
okay to like watch a show. It's okay to go shopping. It's okay to eat some sugar. It's okay if you drink to drink alcohol. Like it's okay. But how do I know where I'm getting to the point where I'm numbing?
Yeah.
And so really it's kind of having to check in with ourselves, like what's going on for me right now? Like why am I using this? And is it in moderation? Obviously, that's kind of a clue in, is if, okay, if I'm eating, a piece of cake, that's fine. But if I'm eating
Mm-hmm.
the whole cake, for example, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna feel bad afterwards. I'm gonna not only feel physically not good, I'm also gonna feel
Guilt.
yeah, guilt, shame, not like, yeah, just all that. I'm not going to feel better. If I binge on a whole season of a show, like nonstop, which I mean, I definitely have. um, I'm like, oh, did I enjoy that show like I would if I just taken it like one piece at a time? Or maybe, like didn't, like, what was going on for me? Maybe there was a lot going on emotionally for me that I was trying to not really deal with.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Um, so we just need to be really careful about that piece of, like, it's okay to like have self-care. Absolutely. We want to do that. But are we using that numbing instead, um, to kind of armor up and not have to, or those difficult emotions are coming up and I don't want to feel those. Um, I give this example a lot, like where I got remarried. This is like 8 years ago, and we have a blended family, and we went on this cruise as a family, and we're on this cruise, and I love travel deals. I love traveling, and so I'm always trying to get like good deals. That's kind of like my side thing. And I'm on this cruise, and if you've been on a cruise, you don't have good internet service, right? So
Ever.
usually, yeah,
No matter
you're
what
paying.
they say.
Yes, right. And I'm getting these deals sent to me like through email, and I get this deal, and it's like an amazing deal. So what am I doing? All of a sudden, I catch myself like I'm in my room by myself. My whole family's like out on the ship, like having fun, and I'm like trying to book these new flights on this next vacation. I'm spending time doing this,
A lot
and
of
I,
time,
I
probably.
I didn't even realize this till later, right? But looking back, I was like, oh my gosh, like what was happening? And I'm like, oh, I think my kids were kind of squabbling that day, and then there's that fear of missing out, like, oh my gosh, this next thing, and almost like those emotions of having to stay in that moment was hard and vulnerable for me. That I felt it was more comfortable to go and like worry about the next thing,
Yeah.
but definitely taking me out of my values because why did I plan this trip? Because I wanted to be with my family. Um, and so we can do that. We use this, there's so many ways we use armor to kind of keep us from showing up and being seen.
And how do you identify that? So if you have been, in this routine for X amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
and, it's just a habit for you to grab your phone or to sit and watch six
Mm-hmm.
shows in a row or to have
Mm-hmm.
6 beers in an hour, whatever. Like, how do you recognize,
Mhm.
oh, hey, this might not be self-care. This might actually be numbing. Let's start to dive into this and unpack it.
Absolutely. So we talk about this like 3-step like process that's been really proven through research that really helps us kind of like dive into what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that first piece is that we call it the reckoning. So all we have to do in the reckoning, so we're feeling an emotion, right? We have to recognize that. That's all we have to do is recognize it and then get curious. So if I were to go back to that example and be like, okay, what's going on for me in this moment? Like, why am I hiding out in this room while everyone's having fun? And just get curious instead of judgmental about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not be mean to myself, not have to like tell myself I'm terrible or any of those things, but more like,
Yeah.
oh, what's going on for me right now? Like, what am I avoiding or what's going on
Mm-hmm.
in general? That's the first piece. So I just have to get willing to recognize I've been hooked by something, some unpleasant emotion typically. And then I need to like get curious about it. And then we get into like the rumble, we call it. And so we rumble with the story and all those unpleasant things. And we look at um, what part of the story is true and not true. And, typically when we're telling ourselves a story, we have a few data points, right? We're like, okay, for example, if let's say my kid got in trouble at school and I got a phone call and I have a message waiting, that's how you find out about it. But I just hear a voicemail and they're saying, hey, your child was, did this thing at school and got in trouble. So my data points are going to be like, okay, I have a phone call. That's like real. We know that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that he got in trouble and whatever they told me. But in the story in my head, it's going into this whole big thing about, oh my gosh, like now the teacher doesn't like them. Now the principal is not going to like them. Like all the other kids and their parents are going to think he's a bad kid and they won't let him come play at their house. Um, and we, and I mean, I know it sounds dramatic, but I mean, this is what we do,
Yeah.
right? Because we care about our kids and that's why we get into this place of like so much emotion around it because we don't want anything bad to happen to them. So we go into this big story, and yet we don't know yet what all the truth is. Now, if I were to call up my friend before I even call the school back and find out more information and say, oh my gosh, like my son, like the teacher hates him now, and like maybe like he's not gonna have any friends now, and he's always gonna be known as this kid who like was, did this bad thing. We call that a confabulation, where we tell a lie honestly. Um, because in my head, I'm telling you the truth to my friend, right? I'm saying this is what's happening.
Right.
But do we know that yet? We don't, right? And that can make that can change in examples like that. It can change how the person we're telling, how they feel about what we're telling them, about
Mm-hmm.
who we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be really careful to kind of like work through that. And that's where we do the rumble. Um, we I'm not sure if we're allowed to cuss on this.
You're fine. We're
So
moms.
yeah, I'm like, okay. So we call it like a blank, shitty first draft to help. Like it's actually like a something that you can like type out on your phone if you're like, you don't have any paper nearby, but it's really good to like write it down and get clear on what's happening. And there's some really great questions we ask ourselves and we write it out. So it helps us. We write out all the things we're feeling, that big story, that mean story. It's almost unshareable. It's a tantrum, right? It's like all the worst. Um, it's all the worst things that, our worst nightmare is happening.
Yeah.
Um, and if somebody read it, we'd be embarrassed, probably. We'd feel, shame around that. And it's so they always say, like, if it's something you would be embarrassed somebody saw or read, that you're actually writing a good one. Okay. Because that's how we are with ourselves. We're hard when we get hooked by emotion.
Right.
But then the idea is that we don't stay there. Obviously, we just write it all out, unfiltered, and then we ask ourselves some really great questions. And we can kind of walk through some of the questions if you want.
Yeah.
Okay. So we start with the what happened, what's the data? So what do we really know, right? So we get clear on like what's actual truth and just what we're worried about. What emotions am I feeling? So what are the emotions I'm hooked with? So I'm getting curious, right, about that piece. And what is the shitty story I'm telling myself about the situation? about the other person if there's someone else involved.
Mhm.
Um, and then about what am I telling myself about me? And then what kind of, so I kind of write all that out, like the most genuine, authentic form, right? Like just tantrum wise. And then we talk about what information don't I have and do I need to find out? So maybe I need to call the school back and get more information, talk to the teacher, right?
Right.
Talk to my child, get there, like what was going on for them? You know,
Mhm.
there's probably a multitude of things that could have happened.
Exactly. They have a side to the story for sure.
Yeah. And then one of my favorite pieces is what is the most generous assumption I can make? And that's actually for us. That's not necessarily for other people because sometimes we're like, well, but I know they're not doing the best they can. But we're like, no, actually, like this helps us give people the benefit of the doubt. And I know I want people to do that for me,
Right.
right? And until we know the information, it's best to kind of do that because why put ourselves in that much more turmoil or like pain until we have all the information? So what would be the most generous assumption? Okay, maybe it's not as bad as I think. You know, maybe it was a group of kids and they were having fun and they just got silly and then it, kind of like what happens, right? Um, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe it's not even my child. Maybe they accidentally called the wrong parent. I don't know. It could be so
Right.
many things. Yeah. And then another question is, what am I learning? So, what am I learning in this situation? Maybe it's okay. I need to um, slow things down a little bit before I respond and react because if I respond in that emotion, it may not look very good, right? And I
Right.
might feel worse about this later because I'm I'm in that emotional turmoil and then I get reactive, right? And maybe for some people that's anger, and sometimes it's maybe I'm just going to cry uncontrollably, and that may not make me feel so good later either.
Mhm.
Um, so I need to figure out and get clear on like, what am I learning? What's helping me? Um, and then also, what are the boundaries do I need to set? So we're not saying, okay, we give people the generous assumption and there's no boundaries involved,
Mhm.
right? So we're able to say, okay, what boundaries do I need to set? So maybe for myself is in that situation, maybe it's okay, I'm going to wait instead of going right to the school right now. I'm going to wait till after school. I give myself some time to kind of process this and come up with a plan that I want to like address this in the right way. And like, how can I, show up in a way that feels good? And that leads us into the next question, which is how do I want to, what kind of human do I want to be and show up as? So,
Mhm.
when I look back at this, in 5 years at this time where my, son got in trouble at school or whatever, um, like, do I want to feel like I was just came down on him so hard and it was like shame based and like making him feel bad? Or do I want it to be like this hopefully beautiful moment where we learn and we like connect and we kind of get to what was going on and like help him understand like, hey, whatever that lesson that needs to be learned there, but in a like a very positive, healthy way. And where I feel like a good parent too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So this can be really powerful for people. I've seen clients do this over and over again. And then it maybe it sounds simple, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, but it's so helpful to write this stuff down and get clear about what is going on.
I totally agree. And I love that. And I love how clearly you presented that. And I would imagine that it takes some practice to
Mhm.
get real good at that and to for that to be your first sort of go-to reaction, right? To
Mhm.
step back, slow down, get the data, do all the things. It's going to take a minute. And so I feel like as moms, if when we're making a shift into changing our behavior, changing the way that we do things, changing the way that we look at things, we have to be easy on ourselves and allow ourselves the time to transition into that because it's a new habit. It's a new, something that we're learning. And I just think that that's really important too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then sometimes, I mean, again, we come a new situation happens all the time, and so we're not prepared for it. Maybe we didn't even recognize we got hooked by that emotion, and so
Hmm.
we can absolutely kind of run with that because we're humans, and yeah, we do want to give ourselves a lot of compassion there. And I always say it's okay, like circle back. You can always circle back, and
Yeah.
it's not all or nothing.
I love that you said we're humans because I think that sometimes we forget because we do such superhuman things. We forget that we're actually human beings ourselves. So,
Yeah.
good little reminder there, Angie. This was phenomenal. I mean, so much information packed into just a short amount of time. I appreciate it. And I'm going to watch the replay probably over and over because it was so much information. And I love that you gave examples of, questions to ask at the end. I think that was super cool and a really good tool for moms to have in their tool belt. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was so fun to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. So if somebody wants to get in touch, if they want to connect with you, maybe join one of your groups, how could they best do that?
Yeah, so if you go to our website at www.familystrategies.org, and under our group page, it's called the Daring Way, and I have some Daring Greatly groups coming up. I have groups for women and then groups for men coming up. I'm in the middle of some Rising Strong groups, and so if you're familiar with her work and her books, which a lot of people are, but even if you're not, it's such good work. It's very motivating and coaching and helping you improve and be who you really want to be and show up in a way that feels really genuine and authentic and wholeheartedly, which is what we love.
Oh, I love that. Thank you again so much. And I will put the links in the show notes, guys. So that way it'll be really quick and easy. You can just click on it and connect with Angie. Thank you again so much for your time and expertise. It was phenomenal. For those of you who want to check out any of our previous episodes or watch the replay of this one again and again, like I'm going to, hop over to our YouTube channel. It is at MOMnation USA. That is our handle. If you prefer the podcast style, maybe you run a lot, bike a lot, hike a lot, you prefer to listen to it in your ears on your favorite podcast platform, do a quick search for MOMnation Talk Radio. And there you can connect with all of our shows, including the new one with Angie. And again, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye, guys.